On today's show, Quinn Hughes, the Capitals insiders are saying it out loud, and if it's real, Washington is officially going all in for Ovi's last ride.
You're Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about proven scores. We're talking about players that know how to perform on the biggest stage in the playoffs. In the Stanley Cup, I think that was something that eluded the Capitals last season, as they didn't have enough proven scores and guys that could answer the bell on the bigger stage. Would Jonathan Marchessault be a good fit on the Capitals? I'll talk about that a bit later. I'll talk about the latest injury updates with Carlson, Leonard, and Charlie Lindgren. But just to get it going here, the news, the big statement out there. And listen, I've heard from all of you out there. What are your thoughts on the Quinn Hughes thing? Are you going to talk about it? Well, yes. As a matter of fact, I am in segment number 1 here. And just right out of the gate, of course, I love the idea. I think that he would offer, just an instant upgrade. So let's be clear here. If the Capitals have a shot, and this is a long shot, I'll get into the who, the where, the why. But if they have a shot at landing Quinn Hughes, they have to take it, period. And why do I say that? The window to win with Alex Ovechkin is closing fast, and opportunities like this don't come too often. As we know well, the Canucks, they're not having the season that they had hoped for. So they might want to offload some of their star pieces in order to build for the future. Now, when you take a look at Quinn Hughes, that isn't just another trade chip. He's a franchise-altering talent, a defenseman who instantly elevates your offense and makes you relevant come the playoff times. And where does this all emanate from? And, the insiders, that's what they do, is to spin a yarn, as they used to say back in the day. Elliotte Friedman's name drop this week, suggesting the Capitals as a potential suitor didn't just stir the pot. It cracked open a door the Caps would be insane not to walk through. If you've got a chance to pair Hughes out there, with some great talent, you have just an automatic instant upgrade. And it could potentially help the Capitals make one last deep run with Ovi on the team. So let's talk about it. The Friedman drop and the immediate reaction, because Friedman's report on NHL Network's First Shift barely hit the air before the Caps, us fans, started buzzing. And immediately my Twitter feed was lit up. And most insiders had assumed that Hughes' sweepstakes would stay within the family. The New Jersey Devils would find a way to bring Quinn alongside his brothers, Jack and Luke. And, that's an easy line to draw, but is that based in any kind of reality? To me, that seems like a Hollywood story waiting to be written, but hockey's not Hollywood. It's ruthlessly optimistic. And, you take a look at the Capitals, on the other hand, representing something deeper, a legacy. This is about Ovechkin's closing years. This could be his final. I still believe it's his final season under contract. What does the future ultimately hold? Well, I guess only Alex Ovechkin knows. But if this is his last season, or say he only has a couple seasons left. That rare chapter where a team balances honoring an icon while still trying to win now. And you take a look at it. The idea of adding Quinn Hughes to that mix shifts the Capitals' narrative from respectable decline to a dark horse contender overnight. And to be clear here, not a decline per se. I mean, the Capitals still sit atop of, the last I checked, the Metro. They still sit atop of the Eastern Conference. But I think that, when we talk about this, we don't want to go down the same roads we did last year. We made it to the second round. Yay. I have dreams of grandeur and much, much more. And could Quinn Hughes, could he be the guy or one of the guys to help elevate this team and push them over the top? So let's make a case for making the move. Take a look at what Hughes brings. Through 25 games this season, he's got 22 points. What does it show? 2 goals, 20 assists, and he's barely in his prime at 26. And you're talking about, big picture, a defenseman who can quarterback a power play, who can break out the puck under pressure and tilt the entire game with one clean zone exit. And, that's a weapon, every contender wants. And, Ovechkin hasn't had a defenseman like that feeding him the puck in years. And the numbers work too, because Hughes carries what is it, a $7.85 million cap hit through the next season, manageable if the Caps lean on long-term injured reserve space. People had talked about that with Pierre-Luc Dubois about freeing up some capital, but by the trade deadline, they could generate over $10 million in deadline cap space room. And, you don't want to wait all the way up until the trade deadline. That is when you pay the Kings ransom. So the real question isn't, can they afford Hughes? It's, are they bold enough to go all in on him? And, to be clear here, and I'll talk about it here in a bit, it is going to come with some pain, that it's not like they're going to say, hey, you want to trade for Hughes? And, hey, why don't you throw in, just these players? No, they are going to go for some of the crown jewels within the Capitals organization. Because this kind of move doesn't just buy a player, it buys a belief that are the Capitals, are the fans, is the organization, are they willing to give up, some pieces? This is going to take pieces, plural, to get a guy of his caliber. But, if it does happen, it does a lot of things. It tells your veterans the front office still wants to win, not just play out the string until Ovi hangs them up and then plan for what's next. And I think, that Chris Patrick is longing to do something to, truly put his stamp on this team, right? That I can go out and I can pull down a player like that. But, the thing of it is the price, the gamble, like I say, make no mistake, it will not come cheap. Vancouver's asking price will be steep because Hughes is the kind of player you build around. You don't trade away lightly, and they want to fix what's wrong with their team. And what's being said out there is reports suggest they're hunting for a young center and a defenseman, basically, 2 foundational pieces. And to be clear here, the Capitals have both to offer. And the players I'm talking about, Connor McMichael, Hendrik Lapierre, maybe even Rasmus Sandin, all names that could make Vancouver's ears perk up. Then, this is where it gets more difficult. Then there's Cole Hudson, right? A left-handed offensive defenseman that mirrors Hughes' style. And those are tough. Those are tough chips to move, especially if you're not guaranteed a long-term extension. Again, this is Elliot Friedman, right? And this is me pontificating about the kind of players that it would take to pull down a player like that. And that's the real risk here. Hughes isn't extension eligible until next July. And there's no sign in trade safety net. I think that, I know that this is Elliot, and I respect his work, of course, but it does seem to be filled with a lot of risk. So you'd be gambling a premium prospect package for a player who might walk in 18 months. But let's be honest here. The Capitals are in no position to play it safe. That, they're playing well now, but an injury or 2 or 3 for an extended period could be curtains for this season or in the playoffs. Because like I said, Ovechkin's timeline is shrinking. And playing conservatively is the same as admitting you're fading quietly into the background. I don't think that's the case. I think that the Capitals absolutely want to do something of this caliber, whether it's Quinn Hughes, whether it's another upper echelon player. But I think that the feeling out there is really to make the most of this, what could be final season of Alex Ovechkin. Now, you could say, well, they could have done that last summer, right? There was the Nikolai Ehlers talk. It didn't happen. I don't want the Capitals to fall into the same pitfall they did last year where, it's a really great locker room and you don't want to mess up the chemistry. How did that play out for the Capitals last year? Made it to the second round, right? That's not a loss. But I think the way the team was built, throughout the season, they were destined for more. I think that if somehow, some way, the Capitals could trade to acquire Quinn Hughes, sign me up. I'm all about it, as I think the Capitals get that much better right out of the gate. So coming up here after the break, we'll talk about another upgrade, a proven performer in the playoffs, in the Stanley Cup. Would Jonathan Marchessault be a good fit? I'll discuss straight ahead. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting from FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place live bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. There's live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly. Player props update as the guys heat up. So whether you're a fan of the Commanders, the Ravens, or whatever other team, do what I do. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit money down on the game. All of a sudden, those games got that much more exciting. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it to the next level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club and get Locked On Capitals with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. If you're a true die-hard Locked On Capitals fan, the Everydayer All Access tier is built for you. You'll get one-on-one text messages with me, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, a 50% discount to the Locked On merch store. Head to the link in the show description to join the Everydayer Club and unlock all access. You can also find the link in the show notes. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in the second segment here, we're talking about Jonathan Marchessault, a proven performer. You take a look at what he did with the Golden Knights, Stanley Cup victory, and now he's stuck on a truly awful Nashville Predators team. Is there the chance that Barry Trotz, former coach of the Capitals, current GM of the Predators, could do us a solid and orchestrate a trade for Jonathan Marchessault? We're talking upgrades in this episode. So let's talk about that here in the second segment here, because, when you take a look at the Capitals, like I say, they're playing well right now, but I think they need a proven playoff, a proven Stanley Cup winner to show them how to play under the big lights. So the Capitals should, as a matter of fact, go all in on a trade for Jonathan Marchessault. And not next month, not later in February, now. I'm clear here. That's the headline. That's the move that could separate a good team from a real contender. Because this isn't, about getting better. This is about staying good. This is about staying relevant. And, Ovi is still producing like he refuses to age, 40 years old. And Capitals owe it to him to surround him with every possible weapon before time catches up. You can sense that's the common theme in here. One last ride with Ovi, ostensibly. Let's surround him with truly great players. And right now, he plays second line right wing with the Predators, but ultimately could fit in somewhere else. Because the Capitals right now are sitting atop of the Metro. They're sitting atop of the Eastern Conference. And, a year ago, that didn't look likely. And like I said, people kind of thought this team was a fringe team. The season before, the last team to qualify for a playoff spot. This last season, the first team. But, you take a look at it. They found a way to climb back, finishing last season, on a high note, where some people thought that, hey, is this team, can they duplicate the success that they had the previous year? And they were able to do that. And at the end of the day, that's impressive. Because you take a look at the team and the way it's constructed, Ovi's still scoring. Tom Wilson's playing, like a man on a mission, like the future captain of this team. And Dylan Strome as well. And the glue guys who keep that top six ticking. But if you dig a little deeper and you see the problem, and it's a problem that we all know about, the power play. The power play is running at 15.9%. That is good for 24th in the NHL, last I checked. And, that's not below average for this roster. It's straight up unacceptable. The Capitals will be exposed in the playoffs if they don't get that, fixed. And I know that it's vacillated a little bit up and down here, but last I checked, it was 24th in the NHL. And that's where the cracks start to show, and because can the Capitals fill the net 5-on-5? They're third in goals per game. That's great. But if your special teams disappear in April, your season disappears with it. And right now, their depth is being tested really hard. We know that Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to be out February, March, right? And also, Ryan Leonard's hurt. You take a look at Protas and Connor McMichael haven't quite taken the next step or put up the kind of numbers that they did last season at this time. And, ultimately, it's a familiar story. Too much pressure on the top line. Come playoff time, teams key on Ovechkin. They'll grind Wilson into the boards. They'll shadow Strome. And they know that Tom Wilson is goal-scoring fuel. And, he will be targeted. He's a big guy that can hold his own. However, it wasn't that long ago that he got injured in the playoffs against the Panthers and what that meant for the Capitals. So who's left to make them pay? That's the hole Marchessault fills immediately. Because you take a look at it, he's not just another name. He's a recognizable name. If you follow the NHL big picture, there's no doubt you've heard of him. He's a spark plug, that guy. He's the guy who can turn a good team into a dangerous one. And what I was talking about off the top, you remember back in 2023, Vegas, the Golden Knights win the Stanley Cup, and Marchessault takes home the Conn Smythe as the playoff MVP. Big goals, big moments, big time energy. That could be the missing ingredient for this team. Don't ride this team too much as they're successful right here, right now. How sustainable is it? Because he's the heartbeat kind of player that you love having in your locker room when the stakes start to rise, because he's done that. Like I said, played on a Stanley Cup winning team, Conn Smythe winner. To be clear here, there's Stanley Cup winners in the locker room as well, but adding another player of that caliber can only elevate the team, because since he's joined the Preds, his numbers have fallen off. Sure. But look at the team. They're rebuilding. He's not surrounded by elite talent like he was in Vegas. You drop him onto a line with the Capitals' top playmakers, and suddenly his game opens up again. He's a perfect complement to, Alex Ovechkin or something of a player of that nature, because he could draw defenders away, play inside the dots, and punish teams that overcommit to the left circle. That's exactly what the Capitals have been missing. But the power play, that's something I've talked about. Let's talk about the power play, because it's painful right now. Everyone knows what's coming. Puck to Ovi's office, one-timer from the circle. They've shaken up the snow globe a little bit more than they have in the years past. But teams have adjusted. They're just sitting on it. So Marchessault changes that dynamic completely. He's dangerous from multiple angles. He moves. The guy shifts. He forces penalty killers to think. That creates space. And what Ovechkin needs most now is space. Suddenly, defenders can't collapse on him with full confidence. Marchessault's threat from the slot or on the right flank opens. That opens the seams that haven't existed in a bit. And that is at least one way that you could revive the power play. But you take a look at it financially, I think the move works. The Capitals are projected to have $15 million in cap room by the trade deadline. Marchessault's cap hit is $5.5 million. That's pocket change for a contender like the Capitals trying to contend. The cost and assets, right? That's what we're talking about. Possibly a first-round pick, maybe a prospect, maybe someone like a Marchessault, maybe a Lyndon Lakovic spitballing here. And that's steep, make no mistake about it. But let's be real. If you're drafting, late in the round, you're not finding a Conn Smythe winner. And at what point is Ivan Marchessault going to be able to help this team where it seems pretty like a no-brainer that you drop in a Jonathan Marchessault, who I've talked about before on the show, and automatically your team gets that much better. You're not trading for potential, right? That at the end of the day, that's what you have in like a Lakovic or Marchessault, something of that nature. You're trading for a proven performer, a guy that can answer the bell on the biggest stages. So that is ultimately what the Capitals need. Jonathan Marchessault fits the need. He fills that scoring gap. He brings playoff-tested leadership. And, ultimately they can afford him easier than they could for like a Quinn Hughes, because, they can get a guy like Marchessault without having, to take a wrecking ball to the roster or the cap sheet. So these are all names, that can make this team better. Sooner than later, because you take a look at it. Some people are automatically going to say, Dan, what are you talking about? Take a look. Have you looked at the standings? Did you see the heater that they went on? Yes. But it hasn't been so long that I haven't forgot about how poor they played, where they were at the bottom of the Metro or second to last in the Metro, and they turned it around. That very same thing could happen at the end of the season, but it's not as likely to happen if you add some big pieces. A Quinn Hughes, again, I understand swinging for the fences. A Jonathan Marchessault, a proven performer, right? Those are the kind of moves. And, I know that we want to hold on to the crown jewels. I want to, but we can't keep them all. At some point, some of those players are going to have to be flipped and viewed as assets, not as future Capitals. I know, a tough pill to swallow, but it is a matter of fact. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about injury updates. I'm talking about Carlson, Leonard, and Chucky straight ahead. The holidays are amazing, but they can also get overwhelming fast. Travel, gifts, parties, year-end expenses, it really is easy to lose track of your money this time of year. And that's exactly why Monarch has become such a game changer for me. If you want to keep your finances under control this holiday season, you need to be using Monarch, rated Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025. Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, simple dashboard. Now listen, the holiday spending category can become a lifesaver. You can see exactly what's left, your gift and travel budget in real time. So that's why I love Monarch. That, I love Christmas, but I want to have a little bit of money left in my account when it's all said and done. And Monarch helps me do just that. So in minutes, you can check your net worth, link all your accounts, and keep track of your contributions before deadline. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with the code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. All right, in the final segment of today's show, we're talking about injury updates to some key players. And John Carlson, we know what he means to this team. He is the closest to returning. That he did practice with the regular group and is considered a distinct possibility for Capitals versus Hurricanes. So let's dive into that in the final segment of today's show and taking a look at it here. The Capitals week, in a lot of ways, hinges on Carlson and how if he's able to play against Carolina. And I know the Capitals have found a way to win without him, but I think you would all agree that they play that much better with him in the mix, especially against Carolina, right? In second place, last I checked, behind the Capitals. This would be a great opportunity to create some separation. If he's in, it makes the team that much better. If he's not, I don't think the Capitals' blue line is as sound defensively. Because, you take a look at it. The team is already stretched thin. Leonard out, Chucky out. John Carlson, it should be in, but should is the operative word. And when you take a look at it, it's unlucky. And it kind of dovetails or ties into segments 1 and 2, planning for the unthinkable. How many of you thought a week or two ago that Ryan Leonard would be injured and out of the mix? It very well could happen to any guy on the roster. So that's why it's important. So the hockey gods asking if this roster is really built to handle a punch. And they have done that, right? Pierre-Luc Dubois, Nick Dowd, with both of those players out, the Capitals played some of their best hockey. But Leonard is one that changes the feel of this group. He was just getting hot, right? Young guy, 20 years old, skates well, he hits, he drags veterans into the fight, kind of an agitator, and then was finding his scoring touch. Take that out of the lineup for an extended period. You don't just lose a winger, you lose an edge, because he did provide that. And you start asking your depth guys to be something they're not. Then also you take a look at Lindgren. He's on the ice, not practicing with the regular group, getting some work in. That's a good sign. And what did we see? Clay Stevenson, he got the call up, and then all of a sudden he went down and Garen Bjorklund came up. I still think there's a distinct possibility that we see Clay Stevenson called up before tomorrow night. It's just roster management and contracts, those kind of things, management of those, if you will. And I'll ultimately, I kind of like these. I'm kind of a goalie nerd in that regard. That I know who Chucky is, right? I kind of want to see what a Clay Stevenson, and I know we saw him a bit, but I want to see him again during the regular NHL season, or Garen Bjorklund, see how they fare against some truly great NHL talent. Make Chris Patrick scratch his head and go, who is ultimately the best guy to have in net as the backup to Logan Thompson? But that brings us back to good old number 74. He's back taking full reps. He's with his regular D pairing there. The coach is openly saying he might go. Like I say, he's not a plug and play. This is a guy that plays 23 minutes plus a night, all situations, calm everything down kind of guy. When he's out, the entire team looks, a little bit more frantic, at least on the blue line. So here's the nuts and bolts and the truth here. If Carlson dresses and looks like himself, the Capitals can ride it out. Because we have seen, Leonard is a big loss, to be clear here, but you've seen the players rise up around. That's presented an opportunity for a Sonny Milano, right? That was riding pine for quite a while, or sitting up in the press box in his fancy clothes. Ethan Frank has a guaranteed spot. These kind of things. That, one player's loss is a couple players gain in a lot of different ways. So that's the big thing here. And that's the update. John Carlson, for me, just based on what I saw at practice and what I heard from Spencer Carberry, I think there is a distinct possibility for sure that he will be in tomorrow night. I guess we don't know until the final lineups are handed out there. But, when I talked about this on the Everydayers podcast, and possible injury scenarios to Ryan Leonard, that everyone is saying a head injury. And, there's always the possibility that there's two injuries. I showed, like I said, the videotape to a medical professional, and you factor everything in, the sling, that could be a collarbone, clavicle, that could be a rotator cuff. If it's either one of those, you're talking about weeks or months for recovery. So it could be quite a big setback for the Capitals. They're not, of course, coming out and saying definitively, but all I'm saying is I showed it to someone. I said, knee-jerk reaction. What do you think? What are some possibilities? And this is what they told me. So I know that, the head injury, could be a thing. And like I say, there could always be two injuries. I think that people point more to the fact that there was blood coming out of his face, but I think that could have just been his helmet hitting him, pad, something of that nature. I think, and based on the sling, it lends me to believe that it's more in this area, the upper body area here. We know that, but more specifically, the clavicle or the shoulder rotator cuff area. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. Did Locked On Capitals make your Spotify Wrapped? Prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our national Locked On podcast account on any social platform, and we'll drop you a code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. For those of you on the video side, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure and make your second listen NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI, and I'll talk to you again next time.